Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is evolution of human settlements. The topic we are looking into is human settlements and their characteristics. In this part, we will be discussing importance of shelter, shelter's form and scale with relevance of a city, concepts of landmarks, the importance of shelter. Obviously known to mankind right from time immemorial, it's one of our basic needs. It's a place that can protect us from all the elements, keeps us warm and safe, and also gives us the encouragement to satisfy other needs. It is only when man is safe and ensconced in an environment that his other faculties work and he can progress. So, it's considered to be one of the most important requirements while addressing our physiological needs, along with the need of food, water, air and sleep. So, through time, man's shelters had taken a lot of forms depending on the person's social status or circumstance. The wealthy could provide many roomed mansions for themselves and their family. The rooms are richly decorated, the spaces are lit, very airy and large. They don't have to worry about running water, warmth, cold, heat, nothing. Every day is they have to just concentrate on other activities besides the need to feed themselves and worry that they will not have shelter any moment. These are the usual kinds of houses that you would see. You have a mansion on one end, you have the slum shanties on one end, and in between you have the apartment complexes which houses the middle class. So, on the other end of the spectrum, you have shacks that are found in squatter camps, shanty towns, which are basically slums. They are nothing but corrugated iron sheets placed together for shelter, and this is all by a group of people. They never occur in a single unit. It is always a group of people. Running water is unavailable. They might not have power. The basic need of shelter could be met, but the occupants are definitely have to concern themselves every day to worry about their shelter, food, water, etc. And in between, we have the apartment complexes, the middle class, where they have to work to make sure they pay their rent or their mortgage. They might not be in the dire situation of that of the lower middle class or the people living in the shanties, but they too have to focus on maintaining a kind of life to ensure that they have this roof over their heads. And if you look at a kind of shelter, man has always always moved. There is a requirement of change that is inherent in man. We cannot live in one place and one type of house throughout our life. As and when life changes, circumstances change, whatever the time is, whatever the stage in life we are, we always want a shelter to call for our own and our family members. If you look at the early modern period, what all affected the kind of living? In the early Renaissance period, we were concentrating more on the arts, crafts and things like that. But in the early modern period, with the emergence of the Industrial Revolution, glass was being used extensively as it was a newly found material, which was, could be produced and mass produced. And this altered the facade and the construction of window details considerably, because it became a kind of an element that could be showed off in terms of construction. And initially this was used only for grand public structures like city halls, town halls, courthouses and things like that. Construction in the Renaissance period focused on the design and architecture of the building rather than the materials used. This was largely because of an increased appreciation for aesthetics and design, and then because of the widespread cultural reforms that were happening all around the place. With the industrial period, mass production began using new technological processes which made an increase in the innovation of technology. The rate of building of shelters increased exponentially because things were getting manufactured in factories now. Prefabrication became an important thing, and with the steam engine, people could transport wood and other materials faster. Many different forms could be mass produced in factories. Iron beams became very casual to use. Brick was also being mass produced instead of the old kiln method. So, different materials came about. The cost of bricks was reduced because of manufacturing it in a larger quantity, similarly with other materials as well. The advent of steam and water powered sawmills also allowed the wood to be manufactured at a standard size at larger scales. So, once a standard size emerged, even the type of construction that came about was standardized construction, prefabricated construction. Cheap machine made nails were also available. Combination of these two materials provided for quick and cheap form of shelter in the form of balloon framing. This emerged in America, where wooden construction was very prevalent. So, no longer you required highly skilled carpenters. The whole do-it-yourself method started, where people could start building their own houses, and this was the answer to America's problem of mass immigration at that point of time. So, when people could build their own houses, it was with community's help. A few families would get together and build a part of 3 houses, and they would move in. Materials was cheap, labor they were doing it themselves, and the method of construction was very easy. This is a typical balloon framing that you see. You have the foundation, then you have the sole plate. All of it was done with single simple elements on slats of wood which were prefabricated and come from factories. They were put together with nails. You had studs, you had the floorboards, everything was completely done with wood. The whole word of balloon framing came about because, as the name suggested, this was the first time man was doing something himself, in the sense it was unskilled work. So, this was thought to be an air filled house that would be blown away by the wind, which was definitely not true, because couple of these balloon framed houses still stand strongly till date. So, what happened from the shift from the early modern period to the contemporary period? So, one predominant factor is that the shelters were no longer simple structures. So, we were now talking of towering high rise buildings that were either used to, concrete was used or steel was used. A new innovation and development was the steel frame as a structural element. Brick was also still being used, but more as a cladding material, which gave it a modern look and feel. Lightweight concrete was also used to increase the strength of concrete, and the use of pumps made sure that these concrete could be delivered to many levels and in a faster way. So, high-rise buildings could also be constructed using concrete and in a faster way. Reinforced concrete was another development, where steel rods were combined with concrete. This was also developed. The multifaceted developments during this period have led to practices that have made the industry standard for construction of buildings and shelters. So, they now even building houses and other structures became an industry by itself. It was predominantly done in a way that a lot of these elements were prefabricated. Iron beams came from factories, wooden beams came from factories, glass came from factories, and you just got together at the site and put it together. This was some of the high rise buildings that you see. If you look at respect to the types of houses you see in a city, or in a what kind of scale and proportion shelter takes in the city. On one side you have the bungalow, which is a big house. They are built outside the cities, usually in suburbs, where there is enough space available and land is not a premium value. Then you have apartments, which are basically tall buildings with small dwelling units within them. They are built in any cities anywhere where much space is not available. You have a detached house, This is a freestanding residential building. You will find them in less dense areas in the suburbs and maybe sometimes even rural areas. They have garages and they are surrounded by a garden. A semi-detached house is nothing but a townhouse. This you find in the richer parts of cities where two houses would share a basic common wall and the entire house would be mirror imaged. They would not have much of a garage or a garden. You will just have a small strip of greenery. So this was basically the beginning of suburbanization in United Kingdom and Ireland. This kind of housing emerged there first. It's halfway between a terraced house and a detached house. These are terraced houses or basically row houses that you see, where in the 17th century a row of identical houses side by side which share side walls were built. They were first and last of these was called a terrace because if you look at it from a distance, it's like a uniform roof is shared by all of them, which is actually not the case. If you look at a terrace take, they will have a common sharing parking lot like this, nothing in terms of greenery, maybe just a few shrubs, and they would be all facing in towards a courtyard because this was the only source of lighting and ventilation. As they were built side by side, there was no windows that were available in the other parts of the house. These are row houses. They were the predominant features in the suburban area in UK. This was again as a result of the Industrial Revolution and post-industrial when you had the emergence of a middle class. These are detached houses, bungalows you have over here, which is basically all on a ground level. Bungalow is something that is now misdefined because a bungalow these days could even be G+2, which is actually not the case. As per definition, it is only a ranch style, that is only on the ground level. It is traditionally actually small, but today, like we mentioned, it can be quite large as well. A bungalow is basically a single dwelling unit with garage, with a small piece of land which is for gardening and a single roof structure. A block of flats or an apartment building or a multi-dwelling unit made up of several apartments. Apartments is the word used in US and flats would be in UK and even in our country. If the building is a high-rise construction, it is a tower block. Because of the emergence of tower block, the topmost floor emerged and the house there was called the penthouse. The penthouse is nothing but a large-scale apartment which is built across the length and breadth of the entire floor. They might have it's completely associated with a luxurious lifestyle. These are all the kind of skyscrapers that have emerged post-industrial revolution. This is a mansion again built in the outer parts of the city exclusively for the upper class. Now this is the townhouses and terraced houses which is most commonly found. Condos is something that you see in the United States. Again, the word condos are different from that of flats because you can rent out a flat versus a condo has to be bought and people who buy it would be living in it. So a flat is different from that of a condominium. Now the concept of landmarks. How important is landmark in the urban situation? They are basically one of the most significant urban components. They can be perceived beyond tall, large, monumental, distinct buildings or towers. Landmarks come in different types, and Kevin Lynch, a very important urban planner from America and the United Kingdom, came about that landmark is one of the most important urban components because he decided that it is a landmark that lends or contributes to the image of a city. They are elements with defining characteristics that are different from their surroundings and are easily recognized or discernible from a particular distance or place. They can literally be buildings that are different from their surroundings, or it could be an element in the urban scenario that is basically a curious object that is standing out, like an old clock tower or maybe an open place where a particular event occurs recurringly. Landmarks can also be defined as features with distinctive spatial features as well as because of color, shape or any potential of value that it has to help people orient themselves and find themselves in that environment. So you have landmarks of different types. The common landmarks that you see are towers, buildings, open spaces, and special urban features. So, a landmark is basically something that you can identify an area with, a city with, or an entire skyline with. So, it can be categorized as these four, and we will just discuss these categories briefly. If you look at towers, they have obviously, most towers are designed such that it is awe-striking, and it garners a lot of attention. So, that is the main reason man has always built towers. He has always strived towards height and its association with spirituality. So, that is why the cathedrals and the churches and even the temples for that matter all had tall structures. Other things that are very important with respect to towers is quest for power. So, a company that is looking to build its headquarters would go in for a tall building or a towering building because they want to show that they are powerful, to show position, wealth, and dominate the city skyline. So, this drive to express power, grandness basically led to many towers being constructed such that religious buildings and palaces were taking a back seat. So, these symbolic towers have practical purposes such as church bells in terms of churches, and in recent years if you look at telecommunication equipment like your cell phone towers, or it could be a lightning protector, it could be any of these. When a tower has a dominant physical characteristic, it can become a landmark to a city and play a role in urban design. Now, in a city like New York, when there are literally hundreds and hundreds of towers, it is the physical and expression of that tower is what makes it a landmark, and just not the mere height of it. So, towers are urban components that follow closely with the growth of the city, which is a response to dense population concentration, high land costs, and scarcity of land. So, initially why towers were being built to now why towers are being built has not changed much. It is only because of rising costs that a tower or a high skyscraper is being built. But the physical characteristics, the architectural elements is what makes it a landmark. Even an obelisk or a simple thing could be considered a tower. It needn't be a building. It doesn't have to be completely usable as such. It could just be something that people associate themselves. It could be completely symbolic, but it should be visibly distinct in the skyline. That is a requirement. So, here is a combination of the number of towers that we see in our city. You have the lighthouse over here. Without doubt, it is a part of the skyline there. You cannot miss it. Here you have the clock tower, which is part of our central railway station. A recently built tall skyscraper, not exactly a skyscraper, but with respect to Chennai skyline, yes. Here you have the Santhom Cathedral, all built at different periods of time for different purposes, but they are all landmarks in their own right. Now, we will discuss buildings and landmarks. Now, a lot of towers that we saw were also buildings. It could overlap over each other in terms of a tower could be a building, but a building necessarily needn't be a tower to become a landmark. It could be a ground floor house, but because of its particular aesthetic character or its particular color, scale, any reason, it could be considered ornamentation, size, contrast, dominance, any of these factors could make sure a particular building becomes a landmark and it dominates its surroundings. Now, if you look at it, it has to have a memorable image. It could be a contrast to towers. It actually, in a city of towers, if you suddenly have a structure that is just G+2, that could be a landmark by itself. So, it needn't be distinctive in the skyline, but from a closer distance with respect to a particular area, it should be distinguishable and it should contribute to that area's heritage. Here you again have the police headquarters, the LIC building. This could be thought of a tower in its own time, but now it's garnered a lot of respect as a very important building in Chennai's history. Then you have the Gopuram, which without saying is obviously a landmark, the Kapalishwar temple. The Music Academy, again a very squat building, but because of its strategic location and its relevance in the city life, it is a very important landmark. Now, open spaces. We have seen towers, buildings, and now flat open spaces. How do open spaces actually become landmarks? They could be on two scales, either on a regional scale or on a macro urban scale. So basically what it is there is a hierarchy within the street. Smaller unit of spaces could be aggregated and the larger space could be formed. So basically the street is the lowest end of it. Even a street is an open space. A street could be a landmark, a street junction could be a landmark, and at the urban other end of it you have a large open space which could be confined within particular set of compound wall and used for a particular reason or instances where a street closure is made. You have pedestrian malls, like you have Pondi Bazaar for instance. It is a landmark in the sense that it is an open space. We are talking about the pedestrian area, the streets, but that there is a kind of landmark that is created. There is no building of relevance in terms, they are all covered with hoardings, but it is a very important landmark. It is a stretch of pedestrian shops, and similarly you have its occurrence in Mylapore Tank. Again, there are all architecturally unimportant shops, but in terms of relevance in the historic urban fabric context, they are very relevant. They have a distinct culture and social focus. This provides a less tangible border. So there is no particular compound wall that is built around it, but these open spaces are very crucial as well. Then you have two types of urban spaces like we just discussed. The hard urban open space, which is a closure that is created. You have particular architectural boundaries which functions for a particular reason or gatherings, like the island grounds near Napier Bridge. That is also a very important landmark. Then you have the soft urban open spaces where it's not, you don't have a very solid compound wall as such, but they are categorized by use, size, style, activities, architectural form, relationship to the street and the location. So these are the concepts that deal with the type of open spaces we have in a city. It should be pleasurable, sustainable, and should have an intimate relationship with the nearby buildings. So again, open spaces, it doesn't mean a landfill area where a lot of garbage is collected is going to become a landmark. It should have a particular purpose. It should be pleasurable, sustainable in the sense it should be something that is going to be taken to the future. It can't be a parking lot, things like that. So we should have a critical understanding of such existing spaces. Only then we can make successful use of these spaces. So open spaces are basically nodes and districts that have similar features to that of landmarks. So they actually influence the imageability and legibility of cities. They have the capacity to be a point of concentrated activities and can be used as a reference point as well. So strategic location is important, historic value is important, and type of activities is also important. Here in the top corner you have the island grounds where you have the constant carnival sort of atmosphere. So if you think of a carnival or an exhibition in Chennai, this is one of the first places that you will think of. Here you have Vallur Kotam, an architectural feature plus the open space as well. Here you have the Semmari Punga, again within a compound wall, but this is a soft urban landscape. Similarly, you have Nageshwara Park. So soft urban landscape. In a place like India and Chennai especially, you can't have a park that is not completely compound walled. This is done completely for security issues. It's not a park that can be left open because of other security issues, and henceforth the compound wall exists. That's why they have tried to integrate the compound wall as a part of the garden where it does not hard landscaping but soft. Now we look at special urban features as landmarks. So when you think of special urban features, it could be which is urban furniture or civic furniture. It could be a clock in a particular place, a clock tower in the middle of a junction, a street junction. It could be anything. A sculptural form, it could be because of its color, texture, size, mass, any of this. Obviously this is a very broad description. You can't categorize and say this is what it is, and that's exactly why this category emerged of special urban features. So it's basically, it should be a three-dimensional element in the city which is neither a tower, building or an open space. So anything which is not above the three that we have discussed comes under automatically the special urban feature. If you look at it, it needn't always be utilitarian. It could just have an aesthetic value. They could have profound aesthetic values. It could be utilitarian, but not predominantly. Fountains are acceptable, sculptures, wall murals, and major road junctions. You could have a particular type of clock or anything. All of that is acceptable as a special urban feature. The special urban feature could be in middle of a major open space. That is acceptable, but it cannot be demarcated as an open space by itself. That also leads to people to celebrate a kind of local identity. You should have a cultural relation to it. People should have a kind of story or maybe even mythological incident related to it. It could be a recent landmark that's being made to ornament or decorate the city with art. So basically, the special urban feature should have the ability to promote interaction and communication between the city and its users. It should be a conversation starter. It should be something that defines the city, or at least that part of the city. It should be unique. It needn't be monumental. It could be monumental. That is not the criteria. It should please the masses. It should be predictable, and it should not be something that is enjoyed by an elitist part of society. So, if we look at the kind of special urban features you have, you can see an example over here. You have the two kinds of memorials right on the same road, but these as such are not buildings. They are just memorials for MGR and Anna, but it's just an obelisk kind of structure. It is a lotus-like of abstract structure. It has no relevance in terms of architectural history or anything. It's only because of a relevance to the people and the kind of structure that it's built. It has garnered importance and it is a landmark. Here you have the Annanagar Tower, which is a part of a park now. These are part of the become redundant water towers built in the 60s and 70s, but now it's made into a landmark open space. This is part of a large open space, but you see the water tower, which is now redundant, but it's still an important landmark. Here you have an important street junction, a clock tower, which is the Roypeta clock tower. This has also been there for a very long time. So you can see how different special urban features covers a lot of these elements. Special urban features could include any of these type of structures. It could be associated with, needn't be associated with any particular purpose. You can see these examples that we have just discussed. None of them actually have a purpose as such. They have entertainment value, they have historical value, yes, but now it has become an important landmark. At the end of that, we have seen the importance of shelter and its form and scale in the city, the concepts of landmarks. At the end of this, we should be able to answer the following questions. Discuss our need for shelter and its importance in our life. Describe the forms of shelter in early modern period. Discuss briefly the forms of shelter in contemporary era. What are the commonly seen types of houses in a city? Discuss any two in detail. What is a landmark? What roles do landmarks play in a city? Discuss in detail. That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.